Hello, welcome back to Tayrock Rockin Well the Podcast. I am your host, Taylor Rockwell, and today with me I am joined, lovely Jack Rockwell.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here back once again in the new studio. It's looking great, sounding great.
Yeah, Jack is
gonna be good.
Jack is the handy-mandy behind all my thoughts. I'm always like, we should build a podcast studio, and somehow Jack always makes it come to life.
We could do that.
Yeah, so all of my big projects, we have that Jack to thank. So how have you been? It's been a long time since we've had you on the podcast. Last time we had you on, you were kind of talking about, we were celebrating you getting out of the military, which was like 8 months ago.
Something like that.
Okay, so give us a quick Cliff Note, top of the show headline.
I've been doing good. I mean, like you're saying, we celebrated me getting out, and that was definitely a huge milestone. So I'm glad to kind of be dipping my toes into normal life, quote unquote, you know. Definitely, like I said, we started this new job. I've been enjoying that for the most part, and it's kind of just all new experiences from here on out, or from then on out, I guess.
Yeah. Why don't you show off with the new hairstyle you're rocking too?
As you guys can see on the video there, rocking the mullet, bringing it back. So everybody out there, it's going to be back in style. Get on the trend while you can.
I think your mullet looks great when you actually do it. Right now it's a little crazy.
Yeah, it's a little...
But I think your mullet fits you so well. Look at these curls.
It does. My hair is so curly. People are always like, are those natural? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so some top of the show things. Last week I said I had an announcement, and it had to do with me and TV. So do you want to make the dun da da da?
Wait, do you want me to... You want me to do what?
Okay, so I got cast.
Yeah.
I got casted to be on a reality TV show for realtors called Negotiators Lux.
Right, which we were all super excited for you. It's definitely, I mean, just being on TV in general is like, I don't know, typical, like crazy, like not star, but like, you know, it's just something.
No,
really
I
cool
was,
and unique
yeah,
and
I was
fun.
super excited to get it done. And basically what had happened is they were doing a cold call on Instagram, and I was like, maybe this would be something I'd be interested in. Me always saying yes to every opportunity. And anyway, I had a interview with a producer, and of course they fell in love with me.
The Tayrock Rockin Well.
The Tayrock Rockin Well. They were like, when can we sign you? We love you. Here's $1 million. I'm just kidding. So no, they did love me. They did send me a contract right after our first interview, and once I got the contract is when I started to get a little bit of hesitation. Basically,
it really was just you know, everything we do for the most part is kind of, how can this be mutually beneficial? And after looking over kind of the fine print and the little details with it all, it wasn't really mutually beneficial. It was kind of a lot of legwork for you.
Essentially what it came down to is I wanted to make sure this was a good investment for me and my time. And I have a lot going on, obviously, with the plant business, the podcast, and real estate, and our rentals, and blah, blah, blah. We have a lot going on. And so I need to be present, and I need to make sure that my time is well spent on things that I want to spend it on, to be honest. And when I started looking deeper into this, it just kind of seemed like they were a newer network. They didn't necessarily have the resources I was looking for, and it kind of just would have been a whole lot of me putting in a lot of time, effort, and money to make this vision come to life for them and not get much in return.
Right. It was a lot of putting faith into something that you were kind of unknown.
Let's hope it sells kind of thing. So anyway, it was an opportunity. It was something I really had initially planned on taking. That's why I announced it early last week. But after reading the contract and looking inward, I just think that wasn't the best time or energy I could put in myself. If anything, I'm somebody who is working on making sure I'm putting myself forward and making my dreams come to life, and not necessarily working hard to make their dreams come to life. And that's what it would have been.
But don't worry, guys, because with the details of it all, Taylor had to find a camera crew to kind of follow her around. So she, nothing official yet, but she did find someone that was willing to work with her, and we're kind of thinking about doing more of maybe just a homemade kind of YouTube vlog style, not necessarily
but just
TV network.
No, wouldn't be on TV, but that's what I mean, making my dreams come to life. Maybe if that's something I want to do and I already have the camera crew locked and ready to go, maybe we should just film like my own TV show, and I could produce and kind of figure out how I want the storyline to be. And that's something I could just put on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, just a day in the life kind of vlog style.
No, exactly.
Just hanging out, doing your thing.
So you never know. It might be something in the works.
Let us know what you guys think.
But as of right now, it's not. So it might be in the future. So yeah, those are some top of the show things. It's lovely having you here. If you don't know, this is my husband, Jack, and we've been together for we've been married for going on 6 years. Yeah. So we'll be married 6 years. I think we've been together almost 8 now.
Yeah,
we're getting old.
2. I'm not getting old.
Well, all right. So I think those are some good top of the show things. Let's just dive right into this week's podcast episode. I have intentions on calling this podcast something along the lines of living the life that you want to fulfill and unlocking your full potential. And when I initially brought this topic up to your attention, it was something that you vetoed. You said, I don't want to talk about that, and I don't think I want to do this podcast episode with you. And I was asking why, and it took you a while for you to give me an honest answer. You just kept putting it off, but you finally gave me an answer, and I was wondering if you wanted to share your response that you gave me.
Yeah, it was with Taylor bringing up the title or idea of, living to your full potential and being the most motivated and inspirational, and all the high level feeling good things. I kind of wasn't about it because I don't feel that way right now. I don't feel like I'm living the life I want to live, or that I'm living to my full potential, or I'm not very motivated right now. So talking about these things or thinking about being in a state of those things, that's not where I'm at. So it was kind of like, well, I don't know. It's not really, I'm not feeling the best about that category of my life right now. So
no, and I'm glad that Jack brought this up when he said it, because I immediately was like, oh, that's perfect. Because the last thing I want to do on this podcast is make it seem like it's all rainbows and all butterflies and everything's great, because right now I'm very much in a flow. I'm really in a high productivity mindset. I'm working really hard. I feel really good. My energy is pretty sustainable. However, I'm not sure if that's a sustainable thing. I kind of go through periods where I go really, really high and I do amazing and I do all this work, and I'm getting better, but I somehow still always experience burnout in one way or the other. Or I'll have days where I'm like, I really just need to recharge because I don't know how much more I can do. Right. Ultimately, I just feel like you and I are in very different parts of our life right now. And I think you're going through a unique experience that is ultimately what's leading us to be in different times of our lives. And that unique experience is you were in the military for the last 6 years, and you got out of the military you got in the military right as soon as you graduated. Mm-hmm. And what I think is interesting is that when you joined the military, they told you what your new name is. They told you how to wear your hair, how you can dress, where you're going to live, where to be, what to be, when you sleep, when you eat, when you wake up. Mm-hmm. They ultimately gave you no room to think for yourself. Right. And they didn't for 6 years. And So at the same time when I graduated high school, I moved to a big city, I moved out of my hometown, and I was allowed the opportunity to be anything and everything that I wanted all at the same time. And so it gave me the last 6 years to really figure out who I am and what I want to be in this world. And I think you are just graduating high school, just moving to the big city. You're just like, you are where I was 6 years ago. Right. And you're starting to figure out like who you are. You're growing your hair out, you're experimenting with your look. You really have been getting into fashion recently. And by that, I mean, I buy all the clothes in fashion. But do you agree? Where do you feel like you are at that?
I think you pretty much hit it all. Like, really, like you said, it was 6 years of just having very little decision or choice in really anything that happened, in any aspect of my life. Like you said, even down to what clothes I was wearing, or, it was like you had to shave every single day, and it's like, come on, like, so definitely. And then now since I've been out, it's kind of like, well, what do I want to do? I'm like, well, I want to grow my hair out, and like you said, same thing with the fashion or the outfits I wear. They're all pretty much new to me. Normally I'm wearing just a t-shirt and shorts and I'm like, call it good. But now it's like, wait, I don't have to just wear that because I'm just driving to work and coming home and going to sleep or whatever,
Yeah, so I think these topics are interesting for you and I to debate because it's living the life you want to fulfill. And I think me and you have really in-depth conversations all the time about dreams and desires and money and success. That seems to be what we always talk about. And we kind of charge each other up. But I think it's going to be interesting to further this conversation, being that I'm 6 years into figuring out who I am, figuring out what I want to be, the things in life that I even want to fulfill, and then actually unlocking my potential, versus you're in a place where you're starting to just now have the thoughts of like, what are things that I want to fulfill, and what does my potential look like?
Right. And that's definitely where I'm at, because even when I was in the Navy, it was like, well, I hate these X, Y, and Z about this job. And then now that I'm transitioning into this job that I'm in now, where it's like, well, it's a whole new world for me. I've never worked in a quote unquote normal job. I've never worked in a corporate or, any kind of job like that. Like in high school, I didn't have a job. I just mowed lawns and kind of did like more under the table things. Nothing was like an established workforce. So it is all new. And in the Navy, I was like, I don't want to work for this with these things. And now that I'm kind of in this job where I'm at now, I'm like, okay, I don't have these things, but now I'm finding other things that I'm like, oh, maybe I don't like this, or maybe this is more important than this for me in a workplace. So it is a lot of experience. I just don't have experience I have a lot of experience in some ways, more than you, but then I have a lot less in other ways. So
yeah, which I think is important, because when you got out of the military, I was mindful of the fact that you've been told what to do every moment of every day. You were supposed to be doing something. And ultimately, I didn't want to replace the figure that the Navy played in your life. I didn't want to become the new Navy, and I didn't want to tell you what to do, and I didn't want to start dictating what you should do, or like, ultimately there were just a few months that were a little awkward for you, from my perspective, just trying to allow you to have time to start asking yourself, what are things in my life that I want to fulfill? Do I want to go to school? Do I not want to go to school? Do I want to get a job? Do I not want to get a job? What does that job look like? Do I want to grow my hair out? Do I want to start golfing more? I had my vision for you. I knew what I wanted you to do in those moments, but I tried to keep my mouth shut as much as I could because I really wanted to give you the opportunity to think about what is it that Jack wants and what are things in your life that you want to fulfill. And so I guess my question to you is like, have you thought about it and where are you at right now in that process?
Right. I think definitely the biggest thing that comes to mind when you're saying the first few months was like finding this job that I'm in now. I had pretty much the choice between two jobs, and I was just waiting for someone to tell me like, oh, do this one or this one, because like.
And I remember distinctly you kept asking me like, which one do I take?
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, which one feels right? And you're like,
And-
just tell me whatever one you want, I'll do. And I was like, it's not what I want, it's what you want.
Right, exactly, because I was like, well, I don't know. I'd never had the choice before, or it's been a long time since I had the choice. And thankfully, it all worked out to where I got this job. And kind of going on with me just learning what I want, I at this point know I would have hated that other job that I didn't take. And I'm super thankful that I got this job that I am in now, because it really suits who I am a lot. As much as it can anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of going along with where I am now is I've been in this job since I've been out, and I'm starting to learn more of like, oh, what I do and don't like. And I think overall for me, it's a lot of just working for people, and I don't mind working for people, but a big thing is as I get older and more experienced and I learn more and become more confident in what I know, is I'm noticing that I'm starting to become more not combative, but just standing up for myself more, I guess.
And me and Jack go back on this all the time because Jack always says the word combative, and it's usually coming up in situations where I feel like he's not being combative at all. In any way, and instead I think it's just you sticking up for yourself, or maybe not being a people pleaser, respectfully. Yeah. And I think it's so uncomfortable for you to not be told what to do and not be yelled at all day, because that's what they did in the military. They just yelled at you all day. They told you what to do and you didn't have a voice, and they made sure you knew that. And so I think now that you're trying to find the confidence to find your voice and to essentially have just the confidence to state your opinion or your position makes you so uncomfortable that it feels combative. But in reality, you're just having a voice.
Right.
Would
Definitely.
you agree with me?
No, I definitely agree. I mean, like you said, I am a huge people pleaser. And overall, I definitely put other people ahead of me, which is fine. That's good. You know, like there's nothing wrong with that. But when it's hurting yourself more than you're actually helping other people, that's when it kind of becomes a problem. And I think that's where I'm going through such a huge swing coming out of the military, to where the military, in my experience anyway, was very much military needs over your own personal needs, like no questions about that. Yeah. So coming out of that and actually having some choice or some balance between work life, or even just like your own decisions versus, or you're helping yourself versus helping others, it's kind of a new experience and new field for me to kind of play in, and I'm trying to learn a good balance between where I want to be versus where I'm at.
And it's on it, in my opinion, it's very hard because it's something that I'm working on too. I'm constantly exercising boundaries. That's kind of where I've been putting a lot of energy working on myself, is boundaries with certain people in my relationship, and certain relationships that were once really big in my life, or even considered my inner circle, that I no longer wanted to be my inner circle, and I no longer wanted to have those relationships hold up so much mass in my life. Right. And I've been working on boundaries with really close relationships, like inner circle relationships. I've also been working on boundaries just with like complete strangers, learning to tell people no, not wanting to break my neck just to satisfy a stranger.
Right.
And as much as I like to think that those are good qualities of us for just being so like giving and wanting to help people, we ultimately have fallen victim to putting everybody else's best case scenario in front of ours. Even if it hurts us, we're like, well, at least whatever. But I think we've started to experience a turnaround. It's like we've been ultimately burned at one too many times.
Right.
And
that's kind of where I was going with, where it's good to help others and do what you can for other people and see the best in people, but when it's hurting you, I think that's kind of where, like you said, where we're getting burned, is it's hurting us more than we're even helping those people.
Yeah, and I'll give an example. So the other day we had an Airbnb guest. It's a little uncomfortable to talk about, but we had an Airbnb guest who ultimately was extremely, extremely intoxicated. They were being vulgar. They were being aggressive towards himself, towards his guests, and towards our other guests that we were hosting in our other Airbnb. And this was brought to our attention, and obviously an event had taken place for it to be brought up for our attention. And so Jack and I, as the Airbnb guests, or as the Airbnb hosts, we ultimately had to work with Airbnb to essentially evict this guest. And it was really difficult for me. I know you can talk on it, how it made you feel. But it made me feel really sad because I felt like I could just see the bigger picture of how things were. I felt bad, that the person was that drunk and acting such foolish, and I felt even worse for their guest that they were staying with. And they did say like, hey, please don't make us leave because where are we gonna go? We don't have any hotels booked, and
they were staying with us for like 3 or 4 more days, and they're like, we can't just leave and go back home because we're staying here for an event, which is until like Tuesday or whatever, the last day was.
And so ultimately, like, I'm a person with a soul, and it didn't feel good. However, this was me practicing a boundary. This person was on my property, extremely intoxicated, extremely aggressive, disrespectful, and not only were they acting that way towards us as hosts, but other guests that we were hosting. And ultimately, I had to have a real life situation where I needed to execute a boundary. And it was uncomfortable. And I know you were having a lot of uncomfortability. You kept saying like, well, should we just let them?
Right, because it's, for me, I avoid conflict. Like, you know that about me, is if I can avoid conflict, sounds good for me. But it's, again, putting other people's needs ahead of my own. And in this situation, it was something new for me, but I just had to tell myself and keep reminding myself, like, this person in my own house, well, not in my house, but like on my property, disrespected me in such a way that, like, why should I feel bad for them for asking them to leave when they were the one treating me in such a negative and hostile way?
Yeah.
But again, like you're saying, like, I did want to keep seeing the good in them, and I was like, well, maybe we should let them stay. Like, they were nice, like, honestly, for the most part.
When they were sober, like, they were pleasant.
Right.
Yeah.
When they were in a good headspace, they were very kind, and they didn't seem, and no red flags. But
I remember
it was a couple of times that things happened, and we were like, okay, maybe like.
And and I remember when we were having the debate, what do we do? I remember saying to you, setting boundaries is uncomfortable, but we need to do it. And I kept saying, we don't want to deal with this again tomorrow night, and then the next night, and then the next night. Right. And essentially, that's what a boundary is setting a boundary up so patterns can no longer continue to repeat themselves. And I'm learning that slowly. It's uncomfortable for me. I'm not too sure if I'll ever get in a place in my life where setting boundaries with friendships and strangers and even close relationships is ever going to be easy and effortless. but it's something that I'm realizing is a necessity to
Right.
being successful, and going back to the topic of this, unlocking your potential. Because like you're saying, if you're giving yourself to so many relationships in your life that are not giving back to you, and not necessarily that you're benefiting from, it doesn't even need to be a relationship that you necessarily benefit from, but just a relationship that you gain or at least find pleasure engaging in. And if not, then you're ultimately doing yourself a disservice by giving so much energy to those that essentially are unworthy. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. And it's not like, it doesn't have to be, I think like you're saying, it doesn't have to be to the extent of a friendship or a family member or X, Y, and Z. It's like I interact with people at the grocery store, like the cashier, and something will happen where I'm like, oh no, it's fine, like don't worry about it. But in reality, again, I'm putting their needs ahead of mine, and I don't want to cause a certain conflict to take place. So I just take the loss. And that's where I'm trying to get, is finding a balance of picking my battles where I'm not just losing every battle, or I'm not just like, you know what, you win, like you can have it, or you can do this or whatever. Just finding a balance of, you know what, no, I deserve this, or I'm in the right here, and staying true to that and being confident with that decision.
I think it's something that I work on personally, is setting boundaries. But ultimately, me and you are very much like this, but we're also very independent from one another. And I think for me, I enjoy being your partner. Ultimately, me and you are very much individuals, and I feel like I enjoy being your partner, letting you be your own individual self and letting you work through the things that you want to find fulfillment in and work on, and essentially letting you evolve into your own best version, and me just getting to like love and appreciate you for like on the journey and your evolution. Right. And even though me and you have a lot, we're just close, we're married. But that's kind of, even though I guess I gotta not explain it, like in a way I wish I could just give you this little bundle of confidence to just like speak up for yourself and like just give it to you. But that's where I try to not say as much, and I try to just let you want to be more confident in yourself, and not me say anything that would put it in your head like, oh, I wish you're more confident, and you're like, damn it, like I wish my wife thought I was more confident, and like right. You know what I mean, like ultimately I try to let you, especially coming out of the Navy, and especially I can just see how much you haven't experienced on a social level when the last 6 years you've just been in this weird little bubble that's not the real world. So anyway, before we get too sidetracked, I did write down 7 ways where I feel like I have unlocked 7 ways where I feel like I am unlocking my full potential. And, you know, I kind of wanted to just say what I think they are and kind of hear your viewpoint, being that we're in a little bit of a different place, and any advice you would have for somebody who's maybe in a more similar place to where you're at, or maybe advice to someone who's in my place where I'm at, and just thinking, what advice would you give me to somebody who's in my seat? Does that make sense?
Yes. I got you.
So just kind of like put yourself in your shoes and my shoes, and just give me your general thoughts on like how I think individuals can unlock their full potential.
Right.
Okay. So number 1, mindset. I think mindset is the epitome of where it all begins. And most importantly, not just mindset, but believing in yourself. And I mean, let's be honest, I've developed a little ego. Like I very much am confident, and so much so am I confident, I make sure that others know I'm confident. And when I want people to think of me, I want people to think of me as someone who is that more fearless individual, who's not shy and not unspoken, and very much forward and confident and shoulders back. And how I did that ultimately was faking it till I made it. I don't think I always was this way. I think that I started to find things that I was good at, i.e. real estate, i.e. investing, business. That seems to be where I just like love to just talk about all the time. That seems to be when I'm in my highest flow state. It's just talking business, talking shop. Yeah. And that's kind of what gets me my high. And for a while, I feel like I was just observing maybe how others talked about these certain topics, or how they, I don't know. I just wasn't I wasn't who I am today. And today I feel like I ultimately am a very, very evolved version of myself, because I do hold myself in very, in my opinion, respectable ways.
Right. And I think for you, you found a couple people that you kind of looked up to, and I think you learned a lot from them, and you're like, oh, well, you know, I like I like this thing about them, and I could see myself doing that, or I don't like even this about the person that I do look up to. And like, that's kind of just something that you've learned from these people that you look up to, that you hope to one day kind of be in a similar place as them.
Okay.
So for me, it's, for what I see from you, it's kind of taking the experience from others that you look up to, and kind of portraying that in your own life, and the way you carry yourself every day. And I think, well, for me, I think mindset is, I mean, you know this, but for me, just having a positive mindset is huge. And I think I always try to have the best outlook and best, just see the best in every situation as well as I can, and kind of just trust that things will work out the way they're supposed to.
I think that's what I was trying to hit on when I said like I've developed an ego. My ego is more, in my mind, like nothing could ever go wrong for me. Right. You know what I mean? Like everything in life is always going to go my way. Yeah. Like every opportunity that is presented to me is because the universe wanted that to approach me, and there's a reason I'm getting it, and every no is actually a yes somewhere down the line. And that's what I kind of meant when I said like I've had an ego, where like I just started to get comfortable doing business and talking business, that now I'm like, let's go, like positive, like I can talk about it so effortlessly that now I'm just like, it's all going to come back. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like what you're saying, we're just faking it till you make it, and not that.
And now I feel like I've made it. I don't have to fake it.
You're right. Okay. Not that you're faking it, but you're just portraying that version of yourself, and now that is the version of yourself, if that makes sense.
Because it does make sense, because I feel like the reason I'm in such a high is because this is who I've always wanted to be. Like, this is when I would look at other people as like a kid doing what they did, they did exactly what I'm doing today. And so I think like I'm just like in such like a little like high that I'm.
But you didn't know what you wanted to do until recently, I feel, within the past year or two.
Yeah, and I did just say this on my last podcast. I was explaining in the podcast that I used the example when I was in 7th grade, and they said, write what your career that you want to be when you grow older. And I was like, oh, I don't know. So I just Googled what makes the most money, and it was like environmental scientist. And I was like, oh shit, I'll be an environmental scientist, anything to get me the most amount of money. And so I think even though there wasn't necessarily a tangible word of like entrepreneurship, I just had it. I was like, I'm willing to do anything to just make sure I bring myself the most golden success.
It's funny that you say that, and I even thought it listening back to your last podcast, because I had a similar experience, but it was in like junior or senior year of high school, where you're filling out like the questions, and it tells you what job field you'd be best in, and it gave me like the top 5 choices, and they're all like engineering, whatever, because my brain just works that way. But I looked up the same thing. I was like, which one of these is the top highest paying one? And it was like petroleum engineer.
You're like, okay.
And I was like, I can go to school for 4 years and do that. And it was like, whatever. But
Petroleum engineering?
I don't even know what that is, but don't tell me. Don't ask me.
Yeah.
But it's funny because, yeah, same thing. I was like, well, what pays me the most money?
So now that I'm here and I'm in this flow, this really high vibrating flow, my advice to people in this area who are in similar situations as me would be grounding yourself to make this the most sustainable and achievable thing you can do for the most amount of time. Because I don't want to have these high highs and these low lows, and I want to make sure that I am always on somewhat of a peak, even if I'm coming down. Yes, exactly. And so for me, I say it later in this list, and you mentioned it, but for me, it's surrounding yourself with positive people. That was one of the things I put as number 6. But
let's just roll with that.
Yeah, but I guess before we move on to that topic, being in your position of still trying to figure out your ultimate fulfillment and your best version of yourself, what advice do you have to people who are sitting closer in your shoes and thinking of that positive mindset? How are you finding what it is that brings you fulfillment if you haven't already completely figured it out yet?
Well, I feel like for me, in terms of mindset, like I said, it's just having that positive mindset, but you also hit on it a little bit where it's having that positive mindset to where if you're trying to do something or you ask someone something and they say no, that you don't just quit and give up at that point. You kind of, you understand that there's a reason why that answer was a no then, and just remember that it's only going to benefit you later, or it's going to give you a better opportunity later.
I say that all the time to you, and I say it to my clients when we're looking at real estate houses. I'm always like, real estate houses, when we're looking at real estate, I always say, like, I guess that's where the ego comes in, where I'm like, well, somebody's going to tell me yes. I'm just going to keep asking until somebody tells me yes. If somebody tells me no, I'm like, okay, next. And I just continue to go on. If you don't get the first house you put an offer in, it always works out that the house you end up getting is better than the first 3 houses you wrote an offer on anyway. Exactly. And I think it's just trusting in yourself and having the confidence in yourself that, like, you will always drive yourself to the best destination. And then when things aren't coming naturally, easily, maybe it's just not meant to be yet.
For me, having that mindset of what you were saying earlier, I have a similar mindset. Kind of, you pretty much just said it, where to me, everything is quote unquote easy, right? It's not actually easy, or it's not without putting in the work and energy and time. But once you hit a certain point, you're like, oh wow, this is easy. And that's kind of the mindset that I try to employ with everything. And to me, it's what you put out into the universe is what comes around.
Right.
So to me, I feel good being like, wow, this is easy. Like, oh, I'm, at this job site and I had to program these things to do this and this. And I'm like sitting there trying to figure it out. And like, yeah, it's taken me all day, multiple days, however long to figure it out. But once I figured it out, I'm like, oh, that was easy. Like,
No, and that's what I said in the last podcast. It's like the first time we bought a house, I didn't know how to buy a house, but then I bought a house, and then now I know how to buy a house, and I didn't know how to sell it, and now I know how to sell a house, and then same thing. We're like, oh, we're gonna buy an investment property. Like, I remember being like, I am okay, like, we're gonna buy an investment property, I guess. Like, I used to feel weird being like, oh yeah, we're like getting an investment property, like almost imposter syndrome. But now it's like, that's what we do. Now we're Airbnb guys. Now we have rentals. Now we're literally looking for our second investment property because now we just have the confidence to say it's easy. So yeah, let's just go right into the second thing. I have 7 things on here, so I kind of want to hit on them. Yeah. Surrounding yourself with positive people.
Yep. Overall, I'm sure everyone has heard this at some point, but just surrounding yourself with people that you want to be.
The saying, if you hang out with 5 stoners, you become the 6th.
Exactly.
If you hang out with 5 millionaires, you become the 6th.
You are who you hang around with, and
which is crucial. I honestly don't think people take this as serious as they need to, because I recently have been in a place in my life where, respectfully, I feel as if I have been outgrowing what once was my inner circle. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for me to say because it's uncomfortable, because I still consider these people in my life my friends, just no longer my inner circle friends, right. Which is just life, I guess. You know, I recently just got into a new career. I'm meeting tons of new people, and these people are people that I have more things in common with. They're my daily interest that we interact with, and so these people have been becoming my close friends, which then made me start evaluating other relationships in my life and started to make me realize, like, does this relationship serve purpose in my life? And if so, why? Mm-hmm. And is that something I'm willing to put energy in to nurture? And a lot of the answer was no. Right. I realized a lot of relationships in my life became heavy on me, where I was pouring a lot of my energy into them, lifting them up and charging them, which ultimately left me feeling drained. Right. And I mean, that dynamic shift wasn't supposed to happen. You know, I just necessarily didn't think that these people were supposed to be charging me up. But then I was just like, oh, why do I always feel like drained, like after I hang out with these people? But now that I'm finding this new circle, I'm finding a lot of new relationships in my life that are filling me up and making me ultimately feel supercharged after our meetups. And now I'm realizing it's just because I've been outgrowing, maybe they've been outgrowing me too, but I was outgrowing some of these friendships, ultimately my entire inner circle. I feel like I recently have just gone through a whole new change. Right. And
that definitely just correlates again with the boundaries that you set with people, and also, like we were saying, just putting others ahead of yourself, where you're, like you said, you're charging other people up, but it was leaving you drained. And ultimately that just wasn't beneficial for you. And it doesn't mean you don't have to be friends with these people. Like you said, they're still your friends.
My friends. They're just people I catch up and get coffee with now. They're not somebody I hang out with and spend a lot of my time and hours on anymore.
And overall, it's just hanging out with the people you want to be. Overall, just having that positive mindset is huge.
Just having relationships you pour into and they equally pour into you, right. And it's a more balanced friendship and shouldn't leave you feeling overly charged and excited or overly drained after leaving them. So my question to you is, being in the position you're in, what kind of people are you surrounding yourself with, and do you think there's any changes in your inner circle that you can be making?
I mean, if you know me on a more personal level, you know I'm not intentionally, but I just naturally don't have a lot of people that are super close to me. Not in like a bad way, I guess. I don't know. I feel like that sounded worse. I just mean like I don't connect well with people, or not that I don't connect well, but I don't maintain well.
Jack's really, I think you're very introverted.
Right.
And I think you focus really hard on yourself. You're someone who does a lot of self-work, and you really do focus a lot of energy on you, as well as like you and I know you put a lot of work into like our marriage, and I think you just like spending time with like even our dogs and just really nurturing your everyday family. Right. So, and then I think that doesn't leave much room for...
When you say inner circle, it's like you and the dogs, like you said, you know what I mean? Like there's really not much past that.
If anything, I'm always trying to advocate. I like try to get my friends to play golf with you. I'm like, oh, you should go play golf.
Yeah, exactly. So overall, I feel like I don't have a lot of input for inner circle. However, I do still hang out with people, or even who I'm at work with. You know, everyone has a job. Like there's people who kind of just skate by and do what they need to do to be good, and there's other people that really put a little more into it. And
so you're just saying I want to sit with the people who take their job a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
So I want to take my job serious and confidently.
Right, because for me, I kind of, like you're saying, kind of ego. But for me, I guess not even ego, but
you just want to be prideful of your work?
Where I get confidence is having the knowledge of what it is I'm doing. And the field I'm in is a lot of unknowns, no matter how long you've been in this field. So the more I learn and the more I grasp and get more understanding of what I'm doing, the more confident I get and the more comfortable I am.
Right.
So that's, yeah. So for me, it's putting more time and energy into the job so that way I can feel more comfortable and more confident in it. And that ultimately just kind of goes back to surrounding myself with the people that have that knowledge and have that experience and confidence already.
I feel like just on what we're saying, we're hitting on like all 7 of what I said.
They all
go together.
interlink.
And so, okay, so the first 2 things I said was like mindset and then also surrounding yourself with positive people. If you're surrounding yourself with people with similar mindsets, obviously you're going to become a part of like a little community of that mindset. Another one of the things that I put on here was developing skills. And it was because I was saying, like I said, once I started, I was studying business in school, and I wanted to be in real estate and I wanted to do investments in real estate. But it wasn't until I actually bought my first investment property, graduated from business school, and got my real estate license and started like actively pursuing all of my career. Now I can talk about it all day with confidence and ease. Yeah. But before, I wasn't so eager to start those conversations. I kind of kept those cards a little bit to myself. But developing the skills to be able to do what I want in life ultimately is what's fulfilling my cup. And you were just saying that with your work, right? Of like doing what you know and doing it well gives you the confidence to surround yourself with other people who know and do things well.
Right. And kind of going back a little bit, I don't feel like I need to achieve that confidence and knowledge before I hang out with those people. I think it's the other way around, where I hang out with those people to achieve that. Right. So definitely, I guess, like you're asking, a bit of advice would be, don't hold yourself back trying to get somewhere on your own. Definitely utilize the people around you. That's how the whole saying works of you are who you hang out with is, you're not one of those people yet, but once you hang out with those people, that's when you become that person.
Yeah, and
if that made sense.
It does make sense because along with me trying to practice and execute boundaries, this is recent time, just had somebody in my life who ultimately made a decision that I 1000% did not agree with. It was 1,000,000% off of my moral code. It was nothing that I would ever do myself. And it was nothing I would ever want you to do or anybody I love to do. Right. And this person decided to do this action. And keep in mind, me and this person had a relationship. We had a friendship. And obviously I cared for this person. So when I found out that they did such a horrific thing, it ultimately forced me to execute my boundaries. This was somebody that I didn't want to co-sign their actions. I didn't want to be associated with the action in any way. And I had to do what I was saying, where like, even though it was uncomfortable for me, it was something that I needed to execute, and I needed to tell the person that I ultimately couldn't be their friend or be in their inner circle anymore, because that was something I had to do for myself and put myself forward, because I knew that if I gave that person grace and continued to be around them, that it was almost a matter of time before then my moral compass becomes loosened and I can accept what they did and maybe co-sign it again later down the road, which was just something I didn't agree with. So that was just ultimately another way of like setting boundaries, making sure I have a good mindset, having respect for myself, setting those boundaries in place, even if it made me uncomfortable, but ultimately putting myself first. That was kind of a little side tangent, but it's a prime example of these are real things happening in real life that I'm experiencing in real time, and just trying to be the best version of myself. And by no means do I think I'm there. I think it's going to always be a road of evolution, but I feel like I'm very much where I'm supposed to be and the best version of myself right now, because I'm learning to practice boundaries and put myself first and stay true to unlocking my full potential by having good mindset, spending my time with people that I want to be like, and ultimately, developing skills like them. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just have a question. Now, I mean, I obviously know more of the situation, but with these boundaries that you are putting up, and even not with just that one situation, but now that it's been some time with other people in your inner circle and other people and you've set these boundaries up, do you feel good about it? Like, do you feel like the right choice? You feel confident with it?
100%, because the reason I feel good about it is because when I first looked in the mirror and I said, I'm not sure if the people I'm hanging around are people that I want to be like. Yeah. Which at one point they were. Like, I want to be clear. At one point they were, just they no longer are. And when I kind of started to set these boundaries and start to take myself out of these relationships, friendships, and even more harshly, that relationship where I had to hit a strict boundary, there was a moment where I was like, oh shoot, I cleaned the room. There's nobody to sit with at the table. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I kind of had a moment where I was just by myself, which I embraced. And I'm glad that I embraced it and didn't run back to what was comfortable, to my old inner circle, because the fact that I embraced that emptiness, quote unquote, it left room for new relationships to come, because I wasn't closed off, because I already had like a tight inner circle. I was very much open. I started inviting new people to lunch. I started going out with new people, getting to learn people that I actually wanted to be like. And now I feel like I'm a little bit more selective. I go to lunch and I really ask myself, is this somebody that I want to be with? And if it's a new friendship and I like love them and I really look up to them and admire their position and views on things, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be friends with this person. And I have been on positions where I've gone to lunch with new people and I was like, oh, we're not peas in a pod, and then that's okay. And I can still respect them for their differences, and we can still be friendly and like friends, but I'm not going to spend every evening or dinner getting to know this person more in depth. I'm just making sure that
you're just establishing that as the level of your
and now that I'm a little bit more further in the journey, can confidently say I have a very much new inner circle that is just prime time. Like, very much, I don't know, inspiration. Like, I look up to them, I inspire to be like them, and not only am I in awe, but like there's things that I can give them that we can help feed each other. We're pouring into each other, which is ultimately what I think I was lacking in my old circles that now I'm trying to find, which I feel like I'm doing a much better finding. Right. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Okay. Definitely. And definitely gave a little more insight, and I think
so before we get too long in these, so we had mindset, developing skills, and surrounding yourself with positive people. One of the other things was just ultimately setting goals, I think, is how I have unlocked my full potential, or how I'm unlocking my full potential. And the reason I go with that is you don't know what you want unless you figure out what you want. If you're working towards the unknown, what are you working towards? If you're climbing to a mountain that ultimately leads to nowhere, then you're just tired from climbing. And so it's, I've used the examples many times where I guess what I'm trying to say is manifest what you want And there's never been anything in my life that I wanted something and I didn't get it.
Right.
And it's because I focused my energy on that, and I took action steps to get to where I wanted to be. But now I'm in an interesting place in my life, and I'm sure you can relate or agree because we're in, but we like, okay, let's manifest, let's get our first investment property, and let's start our investment portfolio, and let's do this and this. And ultimately that's what we did. We got our first investment portfolio, we did and now I'm kind of like, maybe I should start thinking about what I want next. What am I working for next? Because for the last few years I was working towards something for so long, and now we kind of have it. It's our reality. It's not something we're working so hard for anymore. And so now I need to make sure that I'm setting continuous goals to make sure I'm hitting those, which I think would be an interesting podcast idea, sharing those goals maybe on here just to hold ourselves accountable and to let the audience know what we're working towards, and maybe even give the opportunity for the audience to let us know what their goals are, so we can better support them. Because you have to put your stuff out there. If you don't put it out there and tell people what you're working on, it's not going to come
accountable.
Even if you're holding yourself accountable, you're keeping it quiet. Like, your goals and desires are supposed to be big. And
I think that also correlates with confidence. Just having the confidence to be like, I am going to achieve this, and I want everyone to know that this is what I want, and I'm going to get there one day, no matter how long it takes. Or if you have a time set to your goal, like, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z in 5 years.
So going off of like what we just said of you getting out of the military and still only 8 months into kind of figuring out your new identity outside of the military, share with us, what are some of your goals, and have you actually thought about them?
It's funny because you're as you were kind of touching on the topic of goals, I was kind of like, wait, what are my goals? Because I think ultimately for me, it's, I don't know, because I don't know. It's like you said, you don't know. How can you have goals if you don't even know what you want? And I think for me, I'm still trying to learn and figure out what I want. And right now it's all a learning experience, this job I'm in. I think I finally am kind of understanding how things work, not only in this job specifically, but just in jobs in general, because it is so different from the military.
And our dynamic is interesting because, well, you're married to me, so but I have a very big personality in terms of like, I always know what I want, and I'm always driven, and I'm fast paced, and I don't take no for an answer, and I'm very bold in the sense of like, I go, and I'll push myself until I get there. And I think a lot of the time, like, let's go, Jack, and I just grab you and take you with me. And I think that's why I think I'm aware of that, and I'm very mindful of that. And I think that's why I try to put my own boundaries in place of not telling you what you want and what you should do. And I give you your space to kind of fumble over your own feet until you can figure out where you're going, because I know that I have like really big dreams, and I know that I'm like, this is what I want to do, blah, 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 blah. And I know it's what you want. I know that, you do want the investments. I know you're really interested in real estate, but I know that those are more my things than they are your things.
And for me, I think it's kind of tying back in with all the options. Like I was telling you the other day, where right now I'm going to school, and it's, I'm just going for like an associate's right now. Until I transfer to a university, just going to community college. And I think every day I go back and forth with, I think I'm going to go to school for this. I want to do this. And I think it's, like I said, I don't know what I want, and I don't know what path I want to take. So it's hard for me to be like, this is my goal, when there's so many options. And I think, like you're saying, though, I do have goals, and a lot of them do kind of reside in real estate, or, just having these investments of this and this and this. But it's more so the underlying goals of how to get there that I'm still trying to figure out and still trying to learn of, well, I can go to school to get this job, or I can go to school and get this job, or I can just continue working in this job that I'm in and just work my way up. It's like there's so many options, and I ultimately want one that I'm going to enjoy and have the best time doing, so it's not all work and no play. But I am still learning on which path I'm wanting to take, and which goals I need to take on that path to achieve my ultimate goals.
I hear what you're saying, and that's why I'm saying I can acknowledge you and I are in very different places, and I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast right now is in their own unique different place of where they're at, you know, whether they've just come back from rock bottom, or they're going through hell right now with something in their life, or they've been through hell, i.e. the military, and they're slowly but surely healing and trying to start having conversations in their head with, like, who am I hanging out with? Do I like them? What do I want to do with my life? Am I on the path? Am I setting action steps? You know, or if they're on a place, kind of like how I was saying, like, oh, I'm just on a high. Like, once you're on the roller coaster, you're on, and it's fast. And, you know, so
Just
everyone,
momentum.
exactly, and everyone's different, but I think it's ultimately understanding how to live a fulfilling life and how to find your potential, so that way even when you're having lows, or you fell off, or you're realizing you're in a place like yourself who's like more in a healing state rather than like a push forward state, ultimately understanding and knowing yourself on how to get on track when you're ready to get on track. And so, yeah, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it, where just everyone has their own goals and desires. And again, it goes back to just knowing what you want and what you're wanting and willing to do, and putting yourself first in that aspect, and just working towards that. But if you don't know what you're working towards or what you want, then, you know, you'll never get there. So definitely just finding what you want.
Yeah, and just ultimately, yes, I know that I hit on it, but because I am so like goals, that's all I do. I journal all the time, just writing down everything I want. I'll be like, Jack, I think we should do this. Jack, I think we should. Jack, can you build me a podcast studio? I think blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? I like appreciate that you're always down for the ride.
And I think it's really just who you are, in terms of, again, what you were saying earlier, where every opportunity you see, you take, and you definitely capitalize on it, and you make it the most of what it can be. So it's like, oh, we have a garage, we're like, well, we'll just make it a podcast studio.
Yeah, no, I understand, but ultimately that's why I try to be mindful and leave room for you to have your own goals and desires, because mine are so big and demanding that I don't want you to get lost in living my life. So I try to always encourage you to live yours, and I think that's why I was saying I just like to be on the sidelines and like cheer you on for who you are, because I know you're kind of in a transitional state in your life right now. Yeah. Well, I think you and I are very independent because you were in the military and we spent the first 6 years of our marriage basically apart. It allowed us to be individuals, but now I'm kind of realizing it allowed me to be an individual, and for me to have the freedom to be like, oh, I find myself, but you know, now I'm just giving you the time to have your own experience, essentially.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think ultimately I wrote down 7 things, but we're kind of hitting on all of them in them. So I'll just kind of read them, and if anything hits your mind, or if you want to say something. But ultimately, how I feel as if you can unlock your full potential is mindset. Having that positive mindset, believing in yourself, and essentially developing an ego. Setting goals so you know what you're working towards. developing skills so you can be confident in what you're doing and start embracing yourself with others who have similar skills. Managing your time. That's not one that I necessarily talked about, but that was one that I put down. Building healthy habits. That kind of goes into relation to the sustainability. So that way I don't want to come out of this. I don't want to hit a rock bottom. I don't want to hit a burnout. Exactly. So I need to make sure I'm enabling healthy habits.
Good balance.
Surrounding yourself with positive people. We talked about that. But one thing that we didn't talk about that I have on here as number 7 is embracing failure. When I say that, does anything come to mind right away?
Yeah, again, it's the like we said, they all really tie into each other, and I think we touched on it a little bit in the positive mindset one, but it's just understanding that everything happens for a reason, and just because this one thing didn't work out doesn't mean the next one won't, or doesn't mean that something better isn't on the path, soon to be reality.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I say like embrace failure, but when I think about it, it's like the reason why I can be so confident is because I am like, oh, everything will always work out the way it's supposed to work out. Everything will always be on my side. And so when I see quote unquote failures, they don't really feel like a failure. They feel like, oh, I'm closer to what's supposed to be.
You're like, it happened for a reason.
Yeah.
And the next thing's going to be better.
Which ultimately is such a freeing mindset, because now I feel like I just free fall into all my projects. I free fall into all my businesses. I completely just am always like, no matter what I do, I can never do it wrong. So I'm going to do it with my full intention. Right. And if I hit the ground with full momentum, that's fine.
It gives you the confidence, and it gives you again, like you said, you're putting your full everything into each thing, so the chances of failure just go down. So like you're saying, everything works out for you, but it's also because you really plan and put into everything working out for you.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, I guess what I want to say is like embracing failure is like, so I have a mentor, right? And he told me that when we started a habit tracker, he told me, I don't want you to habit track any of your successes. He's like, I don't give up about any of your successes. He's like, all I care about are your failures. He said, we're only going to pin how many failures you had a day. That's all I want to know. Don't tell me all the good. He's like, I only want to know the bad. And his position on why he does this is he ultimately wants to prove to me that I'm swinging at the base. If basically you can't strike out if you're not swinging.
Right.
So what he's saying is like, how many times can you fail? But how many swings did you take to get to that failure? And so he's like, you're good at things, Taylor. I know that. You know what I mean? He's like, you're a successful person in your own realm. I know that. People look up to you. I know that. But I don't want to care about that. I want to get you to the next level. So how do we get you to start swinging at things that you necessarily don't swing at? And I think it was ultimately him who made me feel so confident in the failure aspect of business that I necessarily hadn't ever indulged in. And so there's a lot of things, for example, like in real estate, you have to talk to a lot of people, which I don't mind talking to people. There's not a shy bone in my body. I can talk to anybody and everybody, and I don't get nervous or sweaty palms or anything. But it's something about how many times, it's almost like a goal now for me to fail. Like, how many times can I be so engaging with people that they don't want to talk to me?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like, that's what I mean, where I'm like, if I can be so engaging with my waitress and really ask them questions and really get to know them and really embrace swinging at the bat, and then eventually they're like, okay, I gotta go. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was a good example.
To me, to put it in like the simplest terms, what you're saying is, you can stay in your comfort zone and do what you know will succeed every single time, but you're not going to grow from that.
Right.
You need to push yourself out of that comfort zone, take risks, and try something that you wouldn't conventionally try, or that you don't know is 100% success.
Yeah.
And attempt at that until you are 100% sure every time you do that it's going to work, and then you keep stepping up with it. And in terms of swinging at the bat, or whatever, swinging the bat, it's the same thing, the old time saying where you miss every shot you don't take.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
no, exactly.
It's true though. Like, if you're not trying, you're not gonna fail, but you're also not gonna succeed.
Exactly. No, exactly. And okay, for example, I had this meeting with an agent the other day, and it was somebody in my life that I was just like, oh, she seems really interesting. I really want to get to know her. So I invited her to coffee. Mm-hmm. So it's a brand new relationship. The first time I'm sitting down, even meeting this person. And, anyway, her and I were talking, and we were talking about like farming neighborhoods, which, if you're unfamiliar with like real estate term, farming neighborhoods is just where you really find a neighborhood, you're nurturing it, you're sending it pamphlets, maybe you go introduce yourself, you just constantly kind of just send them mailers, right. Just making yourself well known in a neighborhood. So I asked her like, oh, are you farming? And she's like, oh, well, I want to do my neighborhood, but it's already farmed by these other agents. And I was like, well, how often do you see their stuff? She's like, oh, like once every like 4 or 5 months. And I was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? I was like, okay. And so exactly, never. And so I was like, well, why don't you do it? And she's like, well, I don't want them getting mad at me and, ultimately getting upset with me. What if they call me? That's what she said. Mm-hmm. And I go, honestly, let's talk about mindset, confidence, boundaries, not being a people pleaser. But I told her, I was like, what? Absolutely not. I was like, if you live in that neighborhood and that's a neighborhood you want to farm, you want your neighbors knowing you're the real estate agent, I was like, send them all your pamphlets. Go introduce yourself. Go door knock. And I go, do this and this and this. And I go, and honestly, if those agents called you and said, hey, back off my neighborhood, congratulations, because you're doing something right for them to notice you. I was like, that's almost a gold star. And I know that's a little cutthroat, a little dog eat dog like mentality, but it was honestly baffling for me to hear her say that. She's like, oh, I don't want to do something for myself be in the event that I make other people uncomfortable. Yeah. And it's not even like they were doing the most, I
mean, they're doing that everywhere. In a lot of places.
Exactly.
And they're not doing it very good.
Exactly. And so for me, in her eyes, failing would have been if the agents called her and like, get out of my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. But that's what I was saying, embracing failure. If anything, if they noticed that you were doing something in their neighborhood, you're doing something right. And exactly. So it's kind of like, I feel like that might have been a bad example, but more like learning to swing.
Yeah.
Don't just because the ball's coming at you fast doesn't mean you shouldn't swing.
And I know I say it a lot, like just doing something to get to where you want to be is like so many people don't even do that because they're afraid of failing, or they're afraid of what other people might think, or afraid of any conflicts that might come up. But like you were saying with that realtor, just doing anything, which would have been, putting pamphlets out there or putting cards or whatever, you're already so many steps ahead. Like, right. Just taking that first step is the biggest step.
Interesting. Yeah, so, I mean, those were essentially the 7 things that I kind of just brainstormed on how I feel like people can ultimately live a fulfilling life to their metric, mm-hmm. as well as unlocking their full potential. Do you have anything to add? And, now that when I first said this is the topic I want to talk about, and you were like, no. And so now that we're at the end of our podcast, how do you feel now? And, have you gained anything from this conversation? And if so, what would you like to say to maybe give to somebody else listening?
For me, and as well as my advice to people out there, is there is no right answer. There's no perfect formula that's like, okay, just do these 7 things. It's going to be different for everybody, and each thing within that itself is going to be different for everybody, and it's going to be very dynamic. And I think for me, I was not having the confidence because I wasn't feeling the greatest, but it's also like I was just saying, it's like just taking that first step is the biggest step, and it's not always going to be 100% all the time.
And you
it's
shouldn't
like
have to fake it.
Right.
You know, and I mean, I even can hold myself accountable. So I didn't post a podcast last week, but I recorded one. I did record it. It was an hour. And by the end of the hour, I hit end and I go, wow, I hated every moment of that. I don't think I can publish that. Yeah. I haven't even watched it back. I hadn't started editing. I just knew as soon as I was done, I was like, that's not something I want to put out there. And so, but then I'm like, okay, I gave myself a whole week, and now I'm like, how to live a fulfilling life, you know? And so I guess I just want to make sure that I'm being authentic, but truly, I don't know. I guess I want to make sure I'm being authentic, and I don't want people to feel like they have to hide that they're not always in a free-flowing, very creative headspace, because I think that isn't necessarily unrealistic. I just don't think that that's what I'm asking of my audience. I think if anything, I'm just trying to give tools or feedback or experience to just stimulate the brain and get you thinking about, how can I relate this to my life? And do I have similar experiences? Do I have similar viewpoints? Do I disagree with Taylor? And if I do, then let that affirm your viewpoints even more if you disagree with me.
Right.
And so I don't try to make myself look perfect. However, I am very much like, you are what you put out there. So I try to be honest with my experiences, but I also hold myself accountable to hold myself to a high regard. I think the reason I didn't want to put out last week's podcast is because I recorded it early morning. As soon as I woke up, I had low energy. I was kind of just bleh. And I think it showed in my work. I was just, so, you know, blah, blah. Right. And I think that's not what I want to put out there. And for me, it's just taking ownership and pride, but also just giving myself grace that, like, hey, you didn't record the best episode, and I thought about putting it out there, and I was like,
well, it's the same thing. It's just keeping that positive mindset, where instead of being like, wow, that was a failure, I suck at podcasts,
guess I need to cancel the entire show.
Right. You're just like, okay, I'm going to take the week. It's fine. And next week I'll come back even stronger.
And I guess I did have, like, I think the old me would have had a lot of stress and a lot of beating myself up, like, oh, you just came back 1 week and then you don't post the next week. But I guess for me, that's where I'm on my evolution. It's just like, this is my podcast, and this is something I do for fun to help myself as well as help others and get my community involved. And having guests on this season, and it reminds me to, like, just focus on being the most evolved, fulfilling version of myself.
Right. And it's putting yourself forward again.
Exactly. So I guess that's all I really had. This podcast didn't go as I necessarily expected it to, but I'm glad I had a good conversation with you. Do you have anything to add before we head out?
No, I think I touched on everything. Glad to be back. It feels good. Definitely enjoying the more podcasty setup we have. I don't remember if we really explained what we were doing before, but we were just like, we were like holding these like in our hands and sitting on our floor. I
was in the car. They saw that on YouTube. Right. Everyone who was watching the YouTube video saw it.
It definitely feels good to kind of, not that it's, you know, the ultimate setup, but it's definitely.
Oh no, it's rad.
It's definitely more than what we were working
with. Oh no, I'm having fun.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it as well.
So yeah, ultimately, I think I'm going to end the podcast here. It's getting a little lengthy. So thank you for listening if you got this far. Remember, living your fulfilling life is only fulfilling on your metrics of what a fulfillment looks like. You can't look at me, you can't look at Jack and be like, Taylor's so fulfilled because she invests in real estate and she went to business school and she has all these guests on her motivational podcast. That's what fills my cup, but that doesn't mean that's what needs to fill your cup to make sure you live a fulfilling life. If your life is something that's more artistic, I have almost no artistic drive in my body. And I always say to Jack, like, when I hope in the next life I come back as a musician, because I just can't imagine what it's like to be that artistic. But if you know, writing music is what fulfills you, if focusing on your body and trying to build your body to be the best version of itself, if helping others or whatever it is, let that be your fulfillment, and just let my story inspire you to create your own story and your own narrative about your life. And don't hold yourself too much to what other people are doing or what I'm doing or what Jack's doing. Make sure you're putting the energy on yourself and taking the tools I just listed to mold your version of what a fulfilling life looks like. And unlocking your full potential, the second you just let yourself be who you are in real time and stop fighting it and letting yourself just free fall into wanting to better yourself, making conscious efforts to kind of fine tune yourself into the version you want to be, you are the definition of unlocking your full potential. You're on the road. There's no final destination of what your potential is. It's literally up until the moments of you dying, essentially, when it becomes an end. So it's all within the journey. So love the journey, experience the journey. There's no end destination. It's only a ride. So buckle up, enjoy the ride, and as long as you're being self-aware of things you like, things you don't like, things you want to do differently, people you want in your life, things you want in your life, and working towards those things and allowing yourself to make mistakes but then fix them, you have successfully unlocked your full potential. Do you agree?
I agree. I like that.
So that is the conclusion to the Tayrock Rockin Well Podcast. Thank you, Jack, for coming on this week.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. You're always my favorite guest. Mostly because it's the easiest guest to convince to come on. But you always have good...
I'm always around.
Yeah. No, you always have such good intel. And I think me and you are amazing partners. We're the best partners. But we're also very, very different. So I love picking your brain and hearing your viewpoints and seeing how much we're different, but how much we can complement each other.
Definitely.
So yes, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to the audience. Let me know what you thought on Instagram. As always, I love when you let us know. It's Taylor_Rockwell. And
I'm Jack_Rockwell I have 3 L's, so I think so.
Okay, but anyway, thank you. Live, laugh, love.
Live, laugh, love.
And we'll see you
Thanks
in
for listening.
the next episode.
See you next time.
Bye.
Live, laugh, love.
Okay, can we go inside? Finally, goodbye. My freaking joints freaking hurt.
What?